Dear Wong Laoshi, what is a hero? Oh hey, that's the name of the class. According to our Google overlords, a hero is, quote, a person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities, end quote. This definition is rather broad, and actually not the only one you will find, as many people have different thoughts on what exactly a hero is, making its definition rather flexible. One of the more popular definitions comes from Joseph Campbell and his hero's journey, also known as the monomythical hero. However, this hero's journey is actually less of a definition and more of a checklist for a character to follow as the narrative progresses, not so differently from how it would be graded on this video essay based on what level of boxes I check off of the rubric. Wait, am I gonna fail? The funny thing about this structure is that it allows me to label pretty much anyone or anything a hero, as long as they check off enough of these little boxes. So, while I could very easily pick some classic hero of myth or cinema and knock this project out in a few hours, I decided I was going to pick one of the more ridiculous options available to me and prove that they are a hero as a screw you to checklists and rubrics. One of the more ridiculous options that won't get me kicked out of school in the process. And thus, I arrived at... Ah yes, you Ishigami, our Lord and Savior. If you aren't familiar with him, then allow me to enlighten you. Ishigami is a side character in the romantic comedy anime/manga, Kaguya-sama Love is War. It's actually incredibly difficult, but with enough time and effort, you might be able to discern what character archetype he is. He's the gloomy loner archetype. Because, you know, you can only see one of his eyes. Ishigami is a rather cynical and sarcastic personality with pretty below average grades. But unlike most gloomy anime loners, this man gets proper character depth and development, all starting with... So, in order to prove that Ishigami here is in fact a hero, we just have to put him into Campbell's hero's journey and knock off enough checkpoints to qualify. And there's no better place to do that than the classic sports festival arc. This is the first arc to really delve deep into Ishigami's backstory and the reasoning behind his pessimistic outer layer, and it all starts with his call to adventure, the cheerleading squad volunteer call. You see, Ishigami may be a loner, but despite how his personality is, he doesn't actually want to be a loner. Throughout the series, people he's labeled as normies have often been the target of a lot of his complaints, but in reality, these gripes actually stem from envy. He envies their naive and carefree natures, he envies their overly optimistic outlook on life, and he envies the way they are able to connect so easily with the people around them. Every jab he takes at their ignorant bliss, and every laser death ray he fires at a happy couple, originates from the fact that they remind him of what he doesn't, and believes can't, have. And thus, we arrive at the cheerleading squad. The cheerleading squad is pretty much what it sounds like. A group of people who cheer for their specific team during the sports festival, coming up with wacky slogans, cheers, and themes for themselves to boost the team's morale. And when Ishigami's class asks for volunteers to join the cheerleading squad, he has a moment of realization, or as my LA teachers ever so lovingly hammered into my brain, an aha moment. For you see, the cheerleading squad is just another name for Massive Normie Squad. So, if Ishigami wants to become a normie, all he needs to do is join the cheerleading squad. Absolute genius. Bravo, my friend. Bravo. Can't possibly go wrong.
もしかして赤弾論理展開が間違っていた。応援団に入ればリア充になれるのではなく、リア充しか応援団に入らないのだ。
Ishigami has regrets, to say the least. He immediately knows he doesn't fit in with the rest of the squad, and even Onodera looks at him like she's questioning his own life choices for him. Needless to say, the normies immediately decide a leader, slogan, make a group chat, and goddamn, these have to be the most efficient high schoolers of all time. They end the meeting by deciding that their squad's theme will be cross-dressing, an idea that Ishigami is absolutely thrilled with. After immediately crossing off his classmates as potential candidates to borrow a uniform from, he sees that his only real options are the student council girls. But...
いいの。嫌よ。二度と着られなくなるじゃない。 藤原先輩が一番望みあるけど。
絶対変なことに使う気でしょ。
きっつー。あの人、僕を変態と思っている節があるからな。まあ仕方ないけど、で篠宮先輩は怖いし、やっぱ辞退した方が。
私がどうかしましたか？
うわ、出た！
Well, if he sees her as a demon, it technically counts as supernatural. Up until this point in the story, Ishigami has lived in constant fear of Kaguya, mainly due to many misunderstandings and misguided attempts to help her precious underclassmen. But this is the point in the story where their dynamic completely shifts. After hearing about his issue, Kaguya offers him her uniform to borrow, thus giving him both the means to continue within the cheerleading squad and a new perspective on his intimidating upperclassmen. It's a sweet moment between the two of them that finally allows Ishigami to... Yeah, it's not technically a grammatically correct transition, whatever. This plot point is pretty short, though, as it's pretty intertwined with the next one, so I'll just play the clip.
まあ、少しだけ頑張ってみるか。
石上優、応援団に加入。
Yeah. That's it. He shows his newfound resolve. What else did you expect? Ishigami has begun to take his cheerleading squad journey seriously, and thus begins his cheerleader training montage. This plot point actually counts towards both the Belly of the Whale and the Road of Trial step, and while most of it happens off-screen, we get glimpses of it through Osaragi's eyes at the end of the chapter Kobachi Osaragi wants to crack down. We even see Osaragi talk to Tsubame and Kazuno about how committed Ishigami is to the squad. This is actually the first group of people we've seen Ishigami interact with other than the student council, and we as the audience see the amount of effort he's putting into working with them. When the actual sports festival begins, Ishigami is mainly worried about what everyone will think of him wearing a girl's uniform during the cheering contest, but he's quickly proven wrong and realizes that he's fretted over nothing once the cheer actually begins. Heck, he even starts to have some genuine fun, something he wouldn't have even dreamed of just 2 episodes prior. This experience gives Ishigami a new perspective on his own life, showing that he's not defined by his failures, rather the choices that he makes going forward. While there is no technical meeting with a goddess figure in this scene, I'd argue that this far more optimistic mindset Ishigami begins to adopt is his meeting with the goddess. He's begun to connect with a more positive side of himself, something we haven't seen him do at any point of the series thus far. After all the trials he's faced in the series, every time he's failed the test, every time he accidentally offended someone with his social awkwardness, every time he told Shirogane he was going to go home after some kind of failure, Ishigami has finally overcome...
Ishigami-kun. ずいぶん楽しそうにやってるんだね。石上くん。
何を僕は浮かれていたんだろう。
This is why we can't have nice things. This is why we can't have nice things. Ishigami was on the verge of overcoming his pessimism and trauma, and then this beach ball comes in and triggers its PTSD with her mere presence. Kyoko Otomo was a classmate of Ishigami's in middle school. They weren't close at all, but she would show him little acts of kindness while everyone else mainly just ignored him, leading to him not exactly having a crush on her, but admiring her good character. One day, he coincidentally found out that Otomo's boyfriend, Ogino, was cheating on her. No thanks to his incredibly subtle demeanor, of course. Ishigami's strong sense of justice led him to gather evidence on his own and confront him, but things did not go well, to say the least. Ogino ended up offering Ishigami an explicit video of Otomo as a bargaining chip. Needless to say, Ishigami quickly swapped tactics and went ham on this man. Unfortunately for him, though, Ogino showcased his full supervillain prowess and weaponized Ishigami's only weakness against him. That's right, his social standing. For you see, If we were to place these two adversaries on a social hierarchy, Ogino would be here and Ishigami would be here. Wait a sec. Ogino was able to utilize his social standing to paint the picture that Ishigami was a jealous stalker to the bystanders, leading to Ishigami being suspended. Now, it would be pretty easy to throw Ogino to the wolves. This man's literally swimming in evidence. But this man would have no qualms posting the video for all to see if he's thrown under the bus. So Ishigami's left in a stalemate. He could save himself at the cost of Otomo, or he could condemn himself for the sake of Otomo. So his 1 month suspension ended up lasting the entire rest of the year, of course. Despite doing the right thing, Ishigami still feels the effects of his decision to this day. This experience was scarring for him, and Otomo's mere presence at the sports festival was enough to trigger Ishigami's trauma, causing him to relapse into the worst depressive state we've seen him in the entire series.
僕赤組だっけ白組だっけ僕はどこにいたら石神アンカーが鉢巻きしてなきゃ閉まらんだろう行ってこい周りの視線など気にするな
I know Shirogane isn't technically a classical father figure to Ishigami, but he is an older male character whom Ishigami admires greatly. At the end of Ishigami's suspension, he was surprised to hear that he was allowed to advance to high school. Thanks to the efforts of Ino from the side of the disciplinary committee and, of course, the student council of Shuchin Academy conducting their own investigation of the event, Ishigami was permitted to advance to high school. Shirogane would pay a visit to Ishigami after the junior high graduation, informing him of their findings, which included the paranoia Ogino had experienced due to Ishigami's silence, leading him to break up with Otomo and transfer schools. Every letter of apology he had erased, every lecture he had endured, every single day he had spent in solitude, everything he had suffered had not been in vain. Although his methods were flawed, Ishigami inevitably came out on top, successfully protecting Otomo without her even knowing it. Shirogane, one of the very short list of people Ishigami could call a friend, tying his headband around Ishigami reminded him of this moment, of the people who shone a light on him in his darkest hours, and of the faith others have placed on him. This gave him both the strength to get his act together and the resolve to win his race, all topped off with a simple message to Otomo.
うるせえバーカ。
もう後ろだけ見るのはやめる振り払ってここで勝って証明してみせる僕はこれでいいんだと僕はおかしくないとお前らがどんなに怖い言葉で僕を否定してきたって曲げられたりしないお前らがどう思うとどれだけ脅しかけてきてもビビって屈すると思うなよ証明してやるここで勝ってやる僕はお前らに
Well, he lost. Is what I would say if the actual race itself was meant to be the ultimate boon. The actual ultimate boon.
いい人だ。ちゃんと見るだけでこんなに風景は変わるのか。真のリア充は性格もいいというのは本当らしい。
This entire hero's journey has never been about how fast Ishigami can run. It's been about learning to do his best, regardless of the outcome. The cheer squad didn't care that he lost the race. They cared about how, against all odds, he did his best to achieve his goal. These normies showed Ishigami that even if he fails, the effort he put in is never wasted. They see his efforts, and for the first time, he sees their faces. The concept of not seeing another person's face is often used for background characters, or in other words, strangers. Stories that take the perspective of a loner who is afraid to open up to the people around them tend to utilize this concept to showcase it visually. Seeing others' faces for the first time symbolizes them finally conquering their fear and moving on to a new stage in their life. Ishigami's ultimate boon is both him conquering his fear of failure and realizing that not everyone sees him for his past, but as the person he is today. And this is where we hit a roadblock. Love is War kind of just leaves the sports festival arc at that and moves back to the status quo in the next episode. It's a bit of a stretch, but you could say that Ishigami becoming far less depressed and his willingness to take on more risks in his life is his refusal to return to how he was before. But other than that, the next few points are pretty empty. There is no magic flight or rescue from without that I can find here. The crossing of the return threshold is simply him returning to his student council duties, and the Master of Two Worlds is him finally making new friends outside of the student council, mainly noting Kazuno, Onodera, and of course, Tsubame. Freedom to live is Ishigami overcoming his fear of failure, being free to push himself from here on out. This is something he will continue to do throughout the rest of the series, with his own romantic subplot being the greatest demonstration of his growth. Spoilers for both anime and manga beyond this point, by the way. This event gives him the resolve to pursue Tsubame as a romantic interest, an arc that begins soon after the sports festival, goes through the culture festival, Christmas, and eventually ends at the graduation ceremony, where Tsubame finally rejects his confession. Ishigami is, of course, heartbroken. His pursuit of this relationship is by far the most time and effort we have ever seen him put into something throughout the entire series. If Ishigami had not gone through his character growth, he would have responded to such heartbreak in a much more negative way, likely drowning his misery in a mix of anime and video games. But Ishigami is no longer that person. This new Ishigami is able to recover from his failure spectacularly, remaining close friends with Tsubame even after her graduation. All this being said, we can say with relative confidence that Ishigami fulfills around 15 points on Campbell's Hero's Journey. Let's just say 14.5 for simplicity's sake, which is a better grade than I had. Needless to say, Ishigami quite clearly fits the monomythical hero archetype. Now, Wu Lao Shi, when I picked my topic, you mentioned that you were curious about how I would go about proving that Ishigami is a hero. But the thing is, it's not actually difficult to prove that an important character within a story is a hero. This is because the hero's journey's hero is really just an identical synonym for the word protagonist, which, of course, I recognize as a definition of the word hero, but I'd say it's the most boring and disconnected one. However, analyses of these different definitions of the word hero will have to wait. This script is already over twice the word count of the essay, and I'm also slightly past the due date. Thank you for being so patient. If I were smart, I would have just turned in this script for the midterm project and used this video for the final. But grades are something that Ishigami and I seem to have in common. So with all being said, according to Campbell at least, Ishigami earns a solid B grade in his hero exam, which, at the very least, is a better grade than he got on his midterms in Season 1. Sincerely,